Thank you for tuning in to the Preferable Podcast hosted by myself, Jayden Watkins. This is Season 3, Episode 11, entitled 9/11, Bonus Exclusive Interview. If you would like to be a guest on the Preferable Podcast, sponsor a episode, or advertise on the Preferable Podcast, you can email IamJaydenWatkins@gmail.com. That email again is IamJaydenWatkins@gmail.com. To keep the Preferable Podcast growing and flourishing, I need your financial support. I ask that all of the listeners head over to Cash App, $IamJaydenWatkins, $I am Jayden Watkins, or head over to PayPal at WJayden1. That's at WJayden1 on PayPal. I ask that everyone gives at least $9 on today, but all amounts are appreciated. Now, let's get down to the nitty-gritties of this episode. Season 3, Episode 11, entitled 9/11, Bonus Exclusive Interview. On September 11th, 2001, America experienced a tragic event which will be known as the 9/11 terrorist attack. On 9/11, 4 coordinated suicide terrorist attacks carried out by the militant Islamic extremist network against the United States. Their goal was to crash the planes into prominent American buildings, inflicting mass casualties and major structural damage. The hijackers successfully crashed the first 2 planes into the north and south towers of the World Trade Center in New York City, and the 3rd plane into the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. During the September 11, 2001 attacks, 2,977 people were killed. 19 hijackers committed murder-suicide, and more than 6,000 others were injured. Of the 2,977 fatal victims, 2,753 were killed in the World Trade Center and the surrounding area, 184 at the Pentagon, and 40 in Pennsylvania. The trajectory of people's lives were changed. Many children lost mothers and fathers. Innocent babies were killed that day and never got a chance to say their first word. Siblings lost their siblings that day and never got the opportunity to confess and forgive. Still to this day of this recording, 21 years later, America is still working to heal. The purpose of this episode is not to spread somber vibes, but to inspire people through the tragedy of the 9/11 terrorist attack to live a meaningful life and to live every day like it is their last day. On this episode, I will be talking to a victim of 9/11, Joe Torello. Joe Torello was a 25-year lieutenant with the New York City Fire Department who was a firefighter who put his life on the line to save others on 9/11. Share this episode with someone and be encouraged. Please welcome to the Preferable Podcast, Mr. Joe Torello. Hi, Mr. Joe. How are you doing on today?
Hi, Jayden. Thank you for this opportunity for you to be interviewed.
Thank you for coming on and agreeing to come on the Preferable Podcast on today. I'm so grateful that you decided to come on and share your testimony and be vulnerable to share the message of your 9/11 story. And just to give people a background on this interview, I've been reaching out and trying to call him for about 3 or more weeks now, and I finally got him on. So I'm just excited to jump into this conversation because I believe that it will be impactful and meaningful. It was very hard trying to find 9/11 survivors. A lot of people did not survive, but thanks be to God that Mr. Joe here today, he survived. Speaking of surviving, we're gonna you're gonna know why I said that um, while we when we jump into more in depth of this interview on today. So, Mr. Joe, please tell me just a little bit about yourself, just a couple fun facts, so that the audience can get to know you a little better.
Well, I was born in Brooklyn, New York, in a very rough, tough Italian neighborhood. People say I came from a spaghetto. Uh, didn't come from much. I was one of seven children, a mother and a father. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment, and all my life I just wanted to have things that maybe my parents couldn't afford, and I worked very hard. And today, life is so much different. Life is so much better, and everything that I have, and not that I'm bragging, but I earned everything, and I never asked anything from anybody except an opportunity. And when people gave me an opportunity, I capitalized on it. I never sat back and felt sorry for myself. I believed in hard work, and I believed in commitment and dedication. And I believe you carve your own way through life. You don't ask anything from anybody that you don't deserve.
Wow. Work hard for it. I want to say this to the audience now. It may be some young people who's watching right now, or some adults who's watching. I want to say that don't expect things to come to you without giving something, and don't expect things to come to you when you are not putting in the work to get it. So that's good, Mr. Joe. So my first question to you would be, what is the most impactful piece of advice or lesson that you have received or learned in this pandemic?
Well, I think what happens is it's very important to listen to the healthcare professionals. My son-in-law is a doctor in New York City, and he's in charge of COVID research. It's important to listen to people who are in the medical field and who really have the knowledge about what this virus is all about. There's a lot of erroneous information, people listening to different sources, but the doctors and the healthcare professionals, they're the ones that you should be guided by. This is a very real pandemic. It's affected the whole world. Friends of mine have died from this pandemic, from this COVID 19. Some people taking it very lightly, but at the end of the day, you really have to do what the healthcare professionals are telling you to do, is to protect yourself, protect other people, and to really believe that this is something that could happen to anybody at any time.
Wow, it can happen to anyone at any time, so we should definitely value life. Now, speaking of valuing life, this particular episode 9/11, I just wanted people to hear testimonies of people who have experienced um, or a victim, excuse me, of 9/11, so that we can start to value life even more and have make sure our life that we are living on purpose, basically. So, speaking of that, Mr. Joe, can you tell us where you were the morning of 9/11, what you were doing, just how did that morning start? Was it a usual morning? Did you go and get your coffee? It's just, can you just tell us how the morning of 9/11 was for you?
Well, well, Jaden, it's very interesting that you should ask that question because I've been asked that question a million times, and my story that I'm going to reveal right now, especially because it surrounds the day of September 11th, could be the most interesting and ironic story that anybody's ever heard that were affected by September 11th and the attacks. On the Back in January 2001, I was in my office in fire department headquarters, and I got a phone call from a company called Fisher Price Toys, and they wanted me to help them design a new action figure, which would be a likeness of a New York City firefighter. And this action figure, part of the Rescue Hero line, was something that kids loved. And I was going to get $1 for every one of these new action figures that they produced, and that would support my public education program that I was running for the New York City Fire Department. So in January 2001, I sat down with Fisher Price executives, the artists and illustrators, and for a whole day, as I was speaking about what a firefighter looks like with his firefighting clothing and his tools and equipment, They had art pads on easels with crayons and markers, and as I'm speaking, they're drawing. And at the end of the day, they had this new action figure called Billy Blazes, which was going to be a likeness of a New York City firefighter. He was going to be in addition to the other rescue heroes that kids love, like Jake Justice, who was a police officer, his partner, who's a canine officer called Bill Barker, an ambulance attendant called Perry Medic, a lifeguard called Sandy Beach, a construction worker called Jack Hammer, a mountain climber called Cliffhanger and his partner Rocky Canyon, a scuba diver called Gil Gripper, a ski patroller called Alpine, a female firefighter called Wendy Waters, and Billy Blazes was going to be their new rescue hero. He was going to be a likeness of a New York City firefighter and helped them design it. And I chose the date of September 11th, 2001 to introduce him to the world. And at 9 o'clock that morning, as I was on my way to a press conference, introduced a new rescue hero, a New York City firefighter called Billy Blazes. And as on my way to the press conference, the first plane struck this tower. As I was in Manhattan, I had to make a decision. What do I do? Do I go to the press conference, or do I make my fire? Or do I go to my firehouse where I started my career across the street from the World Trade Center? And that's what I did.
Pause. Pause. You said just slow down a little bit because I don't know. I think my device is moving a little fast. But you said that you chose it was a decision of either going to this press conference and just getting your name out there and getting these action figures out there to the world, or going to help save lives. Now, some firefighters sacrifice their life for others. You and some firefighters are like, okay, well, I'll just say this: general, ordinary people in the world would say, I'm going to this press conference. What's going on over there, I don't got nothing to do with it. But you chose, you said, to really to go help and go see what was going on. So that shows that you had established a good moral. So could you was it a hard decision, or was it not a hard decision? Was it not a hard decision because that was who you were and who you are?
Exactly. Exactly. It was a very easy decision. It was a decision that I would have regretted for the rest of my life had I not made that decision. Had I gone to the press conference, I would have lived my whole life thinking, why didn't I go down to the World Trade Center, which I did. And I was at the World Trade Center at about 9 o'clock in the morning, and 3 minutes later, the second jet came over my head. And then I realized we were under a terrorist attack. I also realized that everybody on the top of the buildings that were trapped would never get down, and we would never get to them. And the next thing I said to everybody at the scene that I encountered was that the buildings are going to collapse, but nobody would listen to me or believe me. They couldn't understand why I was saying that. Nobody knew before I was a firefighter. I studied architecture and engineering, and I studied the Twin Towers when I was in engineering school, and I understood the way they were constructed. And I knew that they couldn't withstand that amount of fire and structural damage, that the towers were doomed to collapse, but nobody would listen to me. They just wouldn't believe me. It was too hard for them to believe, but I was adamant. I knew the towers were going to collapse. I thought they would collapse about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but they collapsed a lot sooner than that, and I got caught in the collapse myself.
You got caught in the collapse. So you went into this tower, and it was the World Trade Center, correct?
No, I wasn't in the building. I was right outside. I was turning the ambulances away. The ambulance crews wanted to go into the lobby to set up a treatment area. And I said, no, don't go into the lobby because the buildings are going to collapse. And I made them go about 6 blocks away out of the collapse zone. And as I was outside the South Tower, it started coming down and I started running, but I didn't make it. A piece of steel split the back of my head open. Huge slabs of concrete was just hitting my body. And now I was buried under tons of steel and concrete. The back of my head split open. My ribs are broken. My arm is broken. My neck and spine was crushed. I was bleeding internally, and I was suffocating to death when buried with all these people.
Hmm. Wow. Just you put your life on the line.
Well, that's what
So
you do when you become a firefighter or police officer. You take a vow when you get sworn into your department that you'd be willing to give up your life and the discharge of your duties on becoming a firefighter or police officer so that somebody else might live. That's a risk you take. It's a big vow and a promise that you serve the public, and some people don't understand how serious that is.
Wow, wow. So when you were under that debris, how long were you there?
About 25 minutes.
25 minutes. Were you so were you alert?
Absolutely, 100% conscious. I couldn't breathe. I was suffocating. There was no more air left. I was in the middle of all these fires. And I did something I hadn't done in a long time, even though I went to 12 years of very strict Catholic schooling. I closed my eyes and I said a prayer. I hadn't prayed in years. And I thanked God for my career. I realized I was dying and I just wanted to ask God to take care of my family when they got the news that I hadn't made it that day.
So you thought it was a possibility that you thought you would lose your life.
I knew I was dying. I just never thought that I would ever survive it. And I didn't want to die angry. I accepted my fate. I realized that at some time in my career, something like this could happen to me. I never thought it would, but I realized that it could. And on September 11th, I realized that the vow I had taken so many years before on becoming a firefighter, that I was living up to a vow to give up my life in a rescue effort.
Don't go anywhere. Coming up, Mr. Joe Torello tells us how he got trapped under the debris again and how this event changed the trajectory of his life.
Behind, and I broke free and I dove into the engine room in the North Tower, buried the boat on the river, and I was buried and suffocating again.
So you got stuck again.
Again, buried twice that day.
Right after the short break. Don't go anywhere. If you haven't already, please go purchase a copy of my debut book, Higher Heights. The past is behind me and the future is before me. My book is a 40-day devotional book about not allowing your past to hinder you from your future. God created us in his own image, and we should always make sure that we live every day to the fullest. No matter the many mistakes that we make, we can ask God for forgiveness and move on with our lives. You can purchase a copy of my book on any major retail website such as Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or Target. If you would like to book me to speak at your next event, be a keynote speaker of your next Christian event, be a guest speaker at your church, or come and do a motivational presentation at your school, you can email IamJaydenWatkins@gmail.com. Please send a detailed message. That email again is IamJaydenWatkins@gmail.com. Please make sure that you follow me on all social media platforms, on Instagram at I am Jayden Watkins, Facebook and YouTube, Jayden Watkins. So, who was there someone who pulled you out of the
I don't know who they
debris?
are. I don't know who they were. They found me. They carried me on a stretcher and they put me on a deck of a boat on the Hudson River that separates New York from New Jersey. They were holding my head closed and I was screaming in pain. And then the second tower collapsed on top of the boat and I got buried in the engine room of the boat a second time. Everybody jumped overboard into the river, left me behind. And I broke free and I dove into the engine room in the North Tower, buried the boat on the river, and I was buried and suffocating again.
So you got stuck again.
Again, buried twice that day.
And then, so how did you get out that time?
Well, then about an hour later, as I was losing consciousness down in the deck of the boat, people came back to the boat and they came into the engine room to start the motor and they found me. And the boat skipped across the river and I woke up in an operating room, but I didn't know where I was. I was in a hospital in New Jersey and for 3 days, nobody knew where I was.
3 days. You were
Declared dead and missing.
So, how did your family? Did you ever ask them how they responded to that news?
Well, what happened was that morning I'd gotten a phone call before the towers were attacked. It was a very good friend who happened to have, matter of fact, he died last week from cancer, uh, and we just buried him a couple of days ago. But I was supposed to meet him for lunch that morning, that afternoon, after my press conference, which didn't happen, obviously. And he heard rumors that there were people taken across the river to New Jersey, and he was searching all the hospitals, and he was the one that found me, but my family didn't know.
Wow. Uh, And how long did it take you to recover? All right, and you still have injuries to this day.
I just had a big spine surgery back in January, my second spine surgery. My shoulder was operated on, my nose was operated on. And it took me about 4 years after 9/11 because of the brain injury to feel normal again. The brain injury really affected me very seriously.
How old were you then?
This was 21 years ago. I was 46 years old.
46 years old. Wow. And how old are you now?
I'll be 67 in November.
Wow. And you're still here, even with the impacts that you still have to this day. So that story, if more listeners, if you're listening or if you're watching and listening, make sure you go ahead and share this episode so that people can hear what Mr. Joe just said and what he's going to say. So that story, in your opinion, why is it so important that we know our history?
Well, yeah, of course, we need to know our history, right? Because America is being attacked not only from people outside America, but we're being attacked by each other within the country. People are pitted against each other politically, socially, racially, religiously. We're split on so many different lines. Now, there's something I wanted to talk about. America, which is one of the youngest countries on earth, it's amazing that America sets the standard for all other countries to measure themselves up against. In America, let's face it, in the growing process, like even human beings, you make mistakes, correct? We all make mistakes through the growing process, and the growing process of a country like America. America made some grave and some serious mistakes. Listen, there was a time I remember when blacks had to ride on the back of a bus. People from the same sex couldn't get married. Women couldn't serve in the military. But that's all changed. I mean, all right, mistakes were made, and that's what happens in the growing process. But we're a much better America today, and we learn from those lessons. And but it seems that people want to keep re-indicting America for things that happened so many years before. When a person commits a crime and does a and does 20 years in prison, once they're set free, they're not indicted again unless they commit another crime. Why do people keep on re-indicting America for something that's not happening anymore?
Hmm. Do you think incidents of 9/11 could possibly happen again?
Absolutely. I mean, there's always going to be that threat. I think our intelligence knows that, our military knows it, the FBI knows it. At any given moment, because we were attacked in 1993 when they bombed the World Trade Center. I was there for that incident, and 8 years later, they came back again in 2001, and we were told that they probably would come back and try it again. They did. So we realize that terrorism has become part of our life at this point. It's sad, but I think it's a true reality that something we're always going to have to deal with. We have to obviously be very vigilant and try to come up with ways on how we can minimize the opportunities that they get to attack us. But at any given moment, it can happen, and we know that and we see it.
So, to start wrapping up our interview, Mr. Torello, why is it so important, in your opinion, that we value this life? You just said, and why is it so that we value this life?
Everything in this world has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Everything and every person. Live your life. Try your hardest. Give it the best shot. If you find an excuse, don't pick it up. Go through life not expecting anything from anybody except an opportunity. When people give you an opportunity, take it and capitalize on it and make the best of it. Life is full of surprises. No matter what you've been through, there's a reason why the windshield in your car is bigger than the rearview mirror. Whatever happened in your life, don't fret and don't worry about it, because the reason why your windshield is bigger than the rearview mirror, what lies ahead for you is much more than anything you'll ever leave behind. And you'll never know your true strength until your weakest moment in life.
That's good, Mr. Joe. Yes, turn your strengths into your weaknesses, and our flaws, our weaknesses, gives us something to look forward to, making one of our strengths. And of course, there's a reason for every season. There's a reason why you um, had was a victim of 9/11. There's a reason that you are here today with me talking. There's a reason for everything in our life, and we will only trust the process, trust the plan that God has for our lives, and not deny or not regret this life, but appreciate this life, because you only get one life down here.
Absolutely.
So yes, Mr. Torello, that is good. And I hope to the listeners that you today, that you would value life even more. That you will ask yourself, have I really been living my life on purpose? And I'm sure, Mr. Torello, if you did know your purpose before that incident, I'm sure you knew your purpose after that incident, after you start to think back over some things. And sometimes we need to think back over our lives, not all the bad things. Like I said in a previous episode, sometimes we look at the negative side or the bad side of every situation, but start looking at the positive side. That incident, yes, he still have injuries that impact him today, but his life is a example for others. He's going around spreading encouragement and message, his testimony on 9/11, that he made it out through by the grace of God, and that we should never take life for granted. Live every day on purpose. Live today like it's your last day. And I promise you,
Absolutely.
if you live today like it's your last day, you won't have any regrets. Like I said before in that previous episode, forgive, move on, display moral characteristics that you want people to remember you by. So I'm gonna leave this part of the episode on this note. Mr. Torello, what legacy do you want to leave behind?
I want people to find strength in my story, to get over obstacles, to remember that in life there's good things and bad things. There's lessons in both, and sometimes the best lessons are the things that are bad. Those are the ones you never want to repeat again. And just remember, I shall pass this way but once, and any good that I may do, or any kindness I can show to any human being, let me do it now. Let me not defer nor neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again.
Yes, yes, and yes. If you would like to contact Mr. Joe or book him for your event, you can email him at nyfirejoe@aol.com. I'm going to spell it out. That is NYFIREJOE at AOL.com.
Or
Again, thank you.
www.joetorillo.com is my website. I have
Uh,
37 topics on a speaking menu, all very applicable to any audience.
yes, make sure you all go check that out and his website. Again, thank you, Mr. Joe, for coming on the Preferable Podcast on today.
Thanks, Jayden. Thank you. Good luck in the future in all your endeavors, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm truly appreciative of it. Thank you so much.
Let's never forget what happened on 9/11. Let this serve as a reminder to you to live. Live. Oh, live. Let this serve as an empowerment to never take life for granted and to live every day to the fullest. I am Jayden Watkins, saying I will and never stop making this world more preferable. Now let us pay tribute to the lives that were lost and the people who survived 9/11.
I look to you, I look to you, hey, and when melodies are gone, in you I hear a song. I look to you, oh, I look to you. And when all my strength is gone, in you I hear a song.